All right, hey there, and welcome back, folks. Now part two, where we've actually gone through and factored these things out. We're going to go ahead and solve these. In order to solve, we're probably going to have to use either factoring, which we've already did, or maybe completing the square, or good old-fashioned quadratic formula. Who doesn't love a little quadratic formula? That kind of looks like farm. Whoops. Quadratic formula. Before I get ahead of myself here, just one thing to quickly note. If there's ever something on here that you can't really quite read or understand, please keep in mind that I do link all of the note files to the course schedule. So this is a previous notes file from Miss Thestu. You can tell that the lovely handwriting is clearly not mine. So if you ever, oh, hey, there's the bell. Get to class, kids. If you ever need to see the problems worked out, maybe there's a little bit more detail. These are up here for you. So let's go ahead and see where all this stuff comes from. All right, so for the first one, we know that we should have three total answers. And one of them I'm going to get for free over here. X is -2. And then I'm left with this chunk, x squared minus 2x plus 4. When does that equal 0? Well, typically I like to factor if I can. Unfortunately, there's nothing that multiplies to 4 and adds up to a -2. Therefore, I'm going to have to use a different method, whether it's completing the square or quadratic formula. Me personally, I am a big fan of completing the square, assuming I have a plain old x squared with just a 1 attached. If there's a number attached, then I'll typically go quadratic formula. But you know what? Different strokes, different folks. You guys do your preference. So completing the square. First thing I need to do is move the constant to the other side. So it's going to be a -4 over on that side. And I'm going to leave a blank space in its place. Then to fill in this blank space, I need to figure out what value could I put here to complete a perfect square trinomial. AKA, what value could I put there in order to write this as x minus 1 quantity squared? Well, to figure that out, I take half of my b value, half of -2, which is -1, and then I'm going to square that. Well, -1 squared is a +1. In order to be fair, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other, so I have to add 1 over here as well. Well, this is going to result in -4 plus 1. That's -3. So now to solve, I'll take the square root of each side. That's got a negative sign underneath a radical, so I'm going to have an I involved. So I've got x minus 1 equals plus or minus I rad 3. Then I'll just slide the 1 over. So I'll have x equals 1 plus or minus I rad 3. And that is as pretty as it can get. And that is also two answers compiled into one. Because that little plus or minus is a buy one, get one. Little BOGO deal. All right, over here. On this one, we've got 3x minus 1 followed by this nonsense. Spoiler alert, this is not going to factor, so we're going to have to use one of these two methods. I'm probably going to use quadratic formula here. First, let's tackle this guy. 3x minus 1, if I were to set that equal to 0, hey, there it goes. I'll move 1 to the other side, so 3x equals 1. Divide by 3, x equals 1/3. So I've got one of my 3 anticipated answers figured out. Now I need to tackle this beast. So if I call this A, this is B, this is C, and I go straight to my quadratic formula, -b, so -3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 3 squared, that's 9, minus 4 times A, which is 9, times C, which is 1, all over, ooh, I got a little too adventurous there, woof, all over 2A, where A was 9. And from here, I just got to make it pretty. So -3 plus or minus. I'm going to tackle the stuff inside the radical, aka the discriminant. 9 minus, let's see, 4 times 9 is 36. 9 minus 36 is -27, all over 18. So we would call that x equals -3 plus or minus I rad 27, all over 18. Now, we could reduce this. We don't really cover it a whole lot in this class, but rad 27 does break down. If we can reduce that, that turns into a 3 rad 3. Then we can reduce the whole thing by a factor of 3. But for the time being, we can just leave that as is. There are 2 answers built into this, and then we have our third answer up here. All right. Number 3. Should I anticipate 4 total answers? I know one of them right here. 2x equals 0. That means x equals 0. Anytime you have an x just chilling outside like that, automatically going to be 0. X minus 2, so x equals 2. Awesome. I've got half of my answers done. Now I just need to tackle this other part. Again, completing the square quadratic formula, it's entirely up to you. I like completing the square. If you like quadratic formula better, then do quadratic formula. It is entirely up to you. So, completing the square of x squared plus 2x blank equals negative 4 blank. So I had to move that 4 to the other side. I'm going to take half of my b term, in this case it is a positive 1, and I need to ask myself, what would go into these blank spaces so that this side of the equation would resemble x plus 1 quantity squared? Well, to figure that out, I took half of 2, and now I'm going to square that. That's a positive 1. So now as we simplify, negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. We go square roots and solve here. Well, squaring a negative, we're going to get an imaginary value. When all is said and done, I'll move that 1 to the other side, so it'll become negative on the other side. And then plus or minus I rad 3. This is 2 answers, 3, 4. So we have 4 total answers, which means we're on the right track. All right, last and final one, if you're still with me. We've got x plus 5, so x equals negative 5 is one of our answers. And then we have this beast to solve. Again, completing the square or quadratic form, EULA. I personally like completing the square if it's a 1x squared. Some of you guys probably like quadratic formula because it's very algorithmic and it's the same thing every single time. You do you. Whatever works best for you, stick with that. So if I go completing the square, I get x squared minus 5x blank space equals negative 25 equivalent blank space. Then, ooh, you know what? I'm automatically changing my mind. I'm going to have x minus 5 halves. And as soon as I deal with a fraction, that's going to kind of suck a whole lot over here. So I'm going to backtrack. Let's go quadratic formula. Opposite of b, positive 5. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Negative 5 squared is positive 25. Minus 4ac, 4 times 1 times 25. All over 2a, 2 times 1. So, simplify. 5 plus or minus. Square root, 25 minus, let's see, 4 times 1 is 4, times 25 is a hundo. 25 minus 100 is negative 75. So, x equals 5 plus or minus I rad 75. Why did I write it 2? I rad 75 all over 2. So I've got 2 answers here, third answer here, bingo, bango, bongo, we are done. You know the drill. If you have any questions, send me an email, ask a question in class. I am here to help.